Hello, everybody. This is Deb with the UAP Medical Coalition. I'm here with Krys. I wanted to let you know that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this video belong solely to the speakers and not necessarily to the UAP Medical Coalition, its employees, volunteers, or affiliates. All medical references are for informational purposes only. This is not a consultation or therapy session. This content can be triggering for some and is not meant for children. I'm very happy to have Krys here today to share her experiences, and I'm going to let her introduce herself to everybody.
Hi, everybody. My name is Krys, also known as Awake While Sleeping on UFO X or UFO Twitter. I have been a part of the UFO Twitter community for about 2 years now, right about the time I started having experiences. Um, Prior to that, you can say I'm actually technically medically retired. I am a U.S. Navy vet, and I do have a non-combat disability, and so I currently am pursuing my master's of consciousness in transformative studies, and so I'm going through a lot of transition, a lot of change in my life, and that's kind of my background. I'm also married, and I have four amazing kids. The oldest is my husband's, and then we share three children together. And we have two dogs here and several grand puppies. So that's kind of my background.
Thank you for sharing that. Could you please let people know why you became involved with the UFO topic and if you had some experiences related to the UFO topic?
So, funny enough, I actually remember, I think the first thing that kind of really got me into the topic was an article I read that there was a sighting by a airline pilot over Clayton, New Mexico, and I feel like it was in March of 2021 when I read the article, because I think I remember saving it and sending it to my family, and it was just intriguing to me because my mom's from Clayton, New Mexico, so that kind of caught my eye. Um, and so shortly after that, I believe I think George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell may have broke some more news about one of the other military sightings, and I, as a Navy vet, and I think it was the Princeton one. My husband actually served on the Princeton many years ago, so that intrigued me as well. And I believe I just started kind of just researching very casually. Um, and then lo and behold, shortly after that, I began having experiences.
Um, do you want to share what those experiences were?
Sure. So the first known experience, and I say that because I think as you get into the topic, you start to see that you might have past experiences that you weren't always aware of. However, the first known experience was on July 4th of 2021. And it was just a normal 4th of July evening. We were getting ready to watch the fireworks. We lived in San Diego at the time. And we got up on the roof like we always do. I had a camera that I had just purchased, actually a night vision camera, because I had been getting into the topic. So I wanted to see things at night. And then we also had our cell phones out, and we were getting ready to watch the fireworks. And lo and behold, this very large, bright white orb transversed across the canyon at a low altitude. It turned, it glowed very bright blue. It continued around kind of the canyon, around the corner, at a very fast rate of speed. It turned red and orange, and then it reversed back to the line of sight that it was originally in, and it turned uh, bright white. It hovered, and then it descended. Um, and at the time, of course, like this was all new to me. So I, in my head, I was like, no, this is something very prosaic. So I lived in an area actually in two flight paths in Montgomery Field, and the main flight path, all the incoming flights from like Hawaii and everything fly over where I lived. And then in addition, we're not far from Miramar base. So my original thought was something prosaic, but I had been watching the sky for a few months, and I knew, some of the patterns. I knew that this had no propulsion system. I mean, I have video of it both up on the up close camera and the cell phone. Um, there's no visible propulsion system. There was no, blinking lights. There were nothing in compliance if it were to be a drone or anything like that. Um, it just functioned very differently. And, I had done enough research on my own to kind of understand some of those basic things. But of course, I hesitated, and I really kept it to myself for a while. But then it just came more and more clear to me the more I researched that I believe we saw something unusual. And that was the first of what ended up being many more. After that, I saw many more anomalous things, square cubes across the canyon during the day. I have captured video of that. And then we started seeing in February of 2022, I believe February 9th was the first day I walked outside, and I saw a large white orb during the day. I think it was at 3:11 at that time. It's shifted, but we ended up capturing this probably dozens, if not hundreds of times over the next year and a half. I moved from there in May. And it, again, went through all the prosaic things, researched whether it could have been a weather balloon. It's daytime. It would come into the picture. So I have both film and images of it, have many witnesses. And what turned into this one white, bright orb object eventually started appearing with flickering objects, and then those got more strange. Different shapes, different displays, different colors, and it just became this very strange turn of events over the last couple of years. And I've sent images to people. I've sent them to try and get them analyzed, and it's very difficult to do that. But I've spoken with people like Sean Cahill. I've spoken with Dave Beatty. I've tried to get some advice is to show me, prove me wrong, and I just haven't been able to really get any further on that. But what I realized, Deb, I think, is that what became more and more shocking to me about my experiences is that I feel like my interest in them led to them versus me having an experience and then, being led into being interested in them. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, some people say the phenomenon goes to those who pay attention to it. So I've heard that before, believe it or not. Did you
Yeah.
experience any physical effects after seeing these objects?
Um, you know, it's hard to say that I did or I didn't. I was going through a lot at the time, which is another thing that I'm finding when I talk to other experiencers. I was kind of going through my own, individuation, spiritual awakening. It was all part of, I think, the process. But that being said, I was also going through a bunch of physical ailments at the time. Um, and it's hard to kind of say what they were or what they weren't. I was getting breast mammograms and biopsies. Fortunately, that came back negative, so that was good. I was having some muscular and neurological things going on at that time, and those tests have all come back negative. And I feel better from those things. So it's kind of hard to say if there was any positive or negative effects other than psychologically. That's a whole nother story.
Yes, we'll definitely get into those, but I
Mhm.
have to ask, did those physical issues, and thank you for sharing. I know that's hard to share those personal things, but
Sure.
did did those physical issues happen before or after you started seeing those objects?
They began happening before before I saw the objects. Uh-huh. And so I would say, if anything, there, you could say that there was a resolution. But I don't, that's not necessarily causation. There was other things that could have brought resolution as well.
Okay, so did you ever speak to any doctors about the fact that while you were experiencing all these tests and going through the biopsies, you were also seeing those objects?
I did not at that time. I later on shared, um, but it was not in relation to any kind of physical, manifestations or illnesses.
Okay, I was just wondering because we always want to know how doctors respond when a patient comes forward and talks about additional things going on in their life. So you mentioned the psychological impact. So what was sort of your psychological response to having seen so many objects?
Well, it's 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 interesting. It's hard to like analyze, and I've spent a lot of time analyzing it, which I think is another thing that happens to experiencers. Um, I think there was just a confluence of things going on because I was going through some difficult medical things and work things, and um, then I started having these experiences. It was literally like compiled into one giant episode that, some would call a spiritual awakening and some might call it a mental breakdown. I don't know. Either way, I felt like I went through that during this time. And in some ways, the psychological impact of seeing the phenomenon and experiencing it gave me hope, maybe even a distraction. It opened up, like it actually opened up a whole new world for me. And so it 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 in some way psychologically provided a pathway for me to open my mind and my life to new things. And I think that's all been very positive. Um, on the flip side, when you're going through something dark and scary, and you're feeling alone, um, you feel like you're gonna go crazy. You feel like you're, you know, are you slipping from reality? I mean, those things, you go through those things. What I'm learning is that some of that is normal part of individuation and shadow work and 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 that type of experience. But I didn't know that it would be related to seeing and experiencing the phenomenon as well. And so for me, it wasn't normalized. It was very jarring, I guess.
I sometimes think of the phenomenon as like a mirror, and we reflect onto it whatever's happening with us. If that makes
Mhm.
sense. Um,
I think that makes a lot of sense. And it was like such a dynamic period in my life. I think it kind of just accentuated all of those things, good and bad, which I don't think is always bad. I think it was a very needed moment for me. Um, and so, yeah. One thing I will add, which is a little bit off topic, but I think it's important to note, and it's again a little strange, but um, we did notice mechanical effects after that first July 4th. My awning on my back deck, and I know this sounds crazy, but it's true. I even have video of this, but it started malfunctioning, and it to the point where sometimes it would come out at random times, but then specifically at 9:10 p.m., which by the way was the time that we captured the phenomenon on video. which I didn't even know that that connection was there until I was analyzing the video later, and then analyzing the time the awning would be coming out. We had to have contractors come out and unplug it, disconnect it completely from electricity. And even then, it came out, and they insisted it was because of the weight of the awning. But then, and so they tied it up. But then later on, we loosened that and it didn't come back out. So there were electrical effects. So that being said, I do have, an awareness and a concern that there could have been other, impact physically if my awning had mechanical effects. Also, my car had several incidences of weird, strange phenomenon that happened with starting and things working when there was no power given to them. So I think that's important to note because
Mm.
a lot of people don't.
Okay, so we had a little
So
okay. Yep, so we had some technical issues, sorry, but, because you were talking about electrical effects. Go ahead and resume, please.
yeah, so one of the things that we noted is, we did have our awning have mechanical failures, and actually it would start working. We had a contractor come out and disconnect electricity from it altogether, and then it would still roll out. So they came back and they tied it up, and they said it was because of the weight. It was not a mechanical or electrical issue. However, we were able to remove the ties from it, and it eventually stopped coming out. So I know it sounds crazy, but these things happened specifically at 9:10 p.m. when we, saw the UAP and captured it on video at 9:10 p.m. There were synchronicities involved with some of these things as well. So I know it sounds really woo, but it's just, I feel like we need to normalize some of these things that people experience.
Yeah, we actually work with Project Bad Tech on, some of these electromagnetic things that happen as well to people, so we're definitely paying attention to that. So it doesn't just necessarily impact us physically, but it may impact things around us. So it's something to consider as well. So the next question I was going to ask is, since you were going through difficulties and also kind of in, I would say, in a state of transformation with seeing these things, did you ever seek assistance psychologically? Did you ever seek like a therapist or a counselor or someone that might give you some help?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually already going through therapy prior to this, and Deb, I'm pretty open. So I quit drinking alcohol in January of 2020, and because of my military PTSD, and my alcohol use, I was quit drinking on my own through use of a medicine, actually naltrexone, which many people don't know about. Um, but it was very effective. And after that, I ended up seeking therapy, and got into the VA system because I hadn't been tapping into that. And so I was already in the midst of that when all this started happening. And so, yes, I did seek treatment, and I did tell um, one of my psychiatrists, probably not when I was in the midst of it. I didn't. I was really very quiet about it. But as I got more comfortable and I kind of got more open about it, I did share with my one psychiatrist about it. Um, and her response was pretty neutral. I told her, I felt like I had gone through some ontological shock, and she basically looked at me and said, why would you go through ontological shock just because you saw UFOs? Like, that was her response. Like, she normalized the fact that there are UFOs, and she kind of dismissed the fact that I went through ontological shock. So not the best response whatsoever, but not the worst response either. I took it as a win, to be honest, with you. And then I have since shared more recently, because I've moved and I had to get a new psychiatrist within the last week. And I did share with them although I was, um, and they just kind of giggled and looked the other way, and I literally said to them, "I know, I'm sorry. I know you're not trained for this." I didn't know, because I was a little frustrated anyway. But they just kind of giggled at me and didn't acknowledge what I said. So,
I think I see points of I have to say I'm not pleased with either response. Okay, and I think we need to dissect that for a minute. So the first psychiatrist was neutral for the wrong thing, in my opinion. They were, they were expressing the normalization of UFOs, which frankly, I disagree with some people about this. Some people think that your psychiatrist should just believe you and whatever. I think they should keep their opinion entirely to themselves about it.
mhm,
That's just my view on it. Um,
right.
it- so that you should never have any idea of what they believe about it. But I think what they're supposed to be doing is treating your response to situations just like they would treat someone's response to, say, something that might cause them to have PTSD.
Right.
And the fact that they didn't validate your response is what I find especially concerning. And then obviously the second person not only
Yeah.
was not neutral and keeping their opinions to themselves, but also somewhat stigmatizing and demeaning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not thrilled with either of those.
Right. And but I guess, and I know it's sad to say, I'm not surprised. Like, I I don't even know. I think it's just the honesty, the rebel in me that wants to even tell them, because I think it's so critical that they start being prepared, for these kinds of conversations. And but I knew, I kind of knew the response would not be, you know, beneficial to me. Frankly, I've been in. I think I forgot to mention I was in the medical field for 30 years, so I've seen a lot in 30 years, and um, it would be shocking if they had a somewhat appropriate response.
Well, see, okay. This is what gets me. Like the more this happens to people who have these experiences, the more people are going to move away from their regular care providers and move to people who are open to having these conversations or at least supportive of their response to whatever happened. And it is
Right.
awful for some people that I have spoken to that they cannot even have the conversation with their care providers.
Right. It
So,
is. It's terrible. I mean, I think it's when somebody's at, because when you're at that moment, like I said, you're literally, I don't know, Deb, you said I think it was before we got on the call, we were talking about NDEs, and I don't feel like I had a near death experience, but I remember having a moment during this time when I was going through some difficulties in one part of my life. And I remember saying to myself, I didn't want to die. I knew that, but I did say to myself, oh, I wish I had cancer so I don't have to return to this place. And I can't go into many details about it, but and that's when I realized, okay, I need help. And all these things were going on at the same time. And, it, if it weren't for my, and I don't mean to say, if it weren't for myself wanting to take care of myself, I don't think my providers would have seen what was going on, you know?
so did you have anyone help you? Did you have any support? What eased some of this and helped you to heal?
Um, I think I went through, I mean, I have like the most amazing family support system. And during that time, I think it was difficult for me and Eric because I was just going through so much on my own, not because it was not him caring or anything. It was just, you're going through your own stuff in your own mind, and you need to go through your own stuff. Um, but since then, we've really just reconnected, and the support system I have with my family is unbelievable. Um, and then what the other big thing was is I did reach out on UFO Twitter, which I mean I didn't know where else to go to find like-minded people, and I did. I met several people, on Twitter, and I even went to conferences to meet people. I've spoken to people in person. I really am just like a curious being, and so I wanted to know, like, are these people really experiencing these things that I feel like I'm experiencing? Even if my thing turns out to be prosaic, it still caused a psychological transformation. Do you understand? So there's still some
Yes. Mhm.
reality to this, whether it is my reality or not, right? So
Yeah, I've always said we have to put aside sometimes what the explanation is for those objects and focus on our response and how we're dealing with it, at least in terms of the UAP Medical Coalition.
yeah,
Um,
sure,
that's that's my view, that we just focus on how we're dealing with this. How are we dealing with our response to this? So, personally, I enjoy speculating about what the objects are, of course,
of course,
but I
right,
recognize, like, the key thing is none of that matters if someone needs help and they need to feel okay before they can even have that fun speculative experience. Or
yes,
and for some it's not fun, by the way, but it's just
yeah,
you need,
absolutely.
yeah, and you need to be okay first. So I'm glad your family was supportive. That's amazing. That's a really crucial thing. Did you have any, like, psychosocial impact that was not the best? Like, did friends, like, respond poorly, or were you even able to tell your friends?
Yeah, no, again, I think that's where I'm probably lucky again. This question, you gave me the questions ahead of time, and this question is the one that actually I thought, oh my gosh, I think this might be have the most profound effect on me, not in a negative way again, but I I had my family and a close set of friends, a couple, and they were very. She actually went with me to UFO screenings, so supportive. Like, how else? What else can you ask from a best friend? I didn't even ask her; she invited herself. That like, so again, I'm lucky there. And then, but I realized I gravitated, after I started sharing my experiences with some of my family, uh, who live in Arizona. I realized their experiencers as well, and so I found people in my family that were very similar, and yeah, here I am, Deb. We impulsively kind of moved to Arizona a couple months back, so it had a profound effect on my life in that I am gravitated towards people who understand me and can relate to me. In they're my family and I love them anyway, but it's more of a comfort thing. And so that I didn't really recognize that until I read your question. So um I don't again think that's negative. I mean, I miss my children. I moved away from them. That's negative, but I think that there are things that it changes that you don't really recognize right away.
Well, my hope is one day to move away from my children, so that means they're adults and doing well, and they don't need me anymore when that happens, right? So I don't
That's
think
right.
that's
That's
like,
exactly right.
I'm gonna stay positive on that one. I see that as a positive, but um, love
I
you,
like that.
kids. Anywho, so I wanted to say that I think it's great that you found that support. I think that's been huge for a lot of people. So I wanted to ask what you think people who have these experiences, and as you said, you had numerous experiences observing these objects. What do you think they would benefit from when it comes to treatment? Their treatment providers, doctors, therapists. What do you think they need?
Well, again, this is another hard one for me to. Uh, it's not hard for me to answer. It's easy for me to answer from a patient experience perspective. Um, but difficult because I also know the operational challenges as well, and just the hurdles that you, Deb, and your team have to go through to educate these physicians and the staff, and to really indoctrinate the information in through the system that is so difficult to get through. I think the only thing I can think in a very practical, simple, like, could you even just start with putting the question on a new patient form? I know that sounds very practical and simple, but the fact that somebody would ask it opens up that dialogue in people's mind that, okay, this is normalized. Of course, you have to train the physicians and the staff and handling all that, but I just don't. There's got to be a starting point somewhere, and if we're not asking the question, and no one's going to answer it. So I think that's just one very practical way that I could think of. And of course, you want them to be empathetic. You want them to be curious about your experience. You know, I don't want to just come off and say, oh, I had this experience, and come off as delusional, because I think that I'm not. I think I have plenty of evidence to show that I'm not. Of course, they're not going to look at my evidence, but you know, I want my provider to listen to me and to hear me out and to see where I'm coming from. And I think that patients deserve that, and no matter what their ailment is, clearly. And so when it comes to this, it should be from a place of curiosity, I think, because they probably have not experienced many patients who do that.
Can you imagine if if they ask that question, how many answers they're going to get? Like, they don't even know. Like,
I know.
I ask people, like, I let them know that I'm interested in this topic, and like every fifth person or so says, "Oh, I saw one,"
Yep.
you know, and they give
Yep.
me the whole story or more, right? And then people tell me about other experiences that they've had, like deja vu or psychic dreams, or
Yep.
this is, I think, part of the human experience to have what some people call woo encounters.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, you know, what you learn as you dig into the topic. And then like I said earlier, I thought July 4th was my first experience. I can actually find um video I captured on May 14th of the same thing in the sky. I just was I was making fun of it, like, haha, looks like a UFO, and I was actually making fun of it. And then I found images from a broken camera of clearly objects that look like Tic Tacs but it's on a DSLR camera. We were all on a trip visiting my father-in-law. So you go back and you see these things. I've always had precognitive dreams. I've dreamed about Hurricane Katrina. I didn't know all of this was related. And so, you know, we have to train our psychologists is really what we have to do, because it's so much deeper than, you know, a physician at the office, you know, getting the information. Obviously there's medical things too, but, sorry, I'm rambling, but there's just so much to it. I think there's so much potential, but yeah, can you imagine the numbers of people who respond? Yes, it would be high.
Yeah, they actually have found that to be the case when they surveyed academics in universities fairly recently. They found quite a few said they had experiences. The Gallup polls keep going up and up and up for how many people are admitting that they had experiences, and like it's in the millions. Like, I was reading a book today that was from 1968, and it said, according to a Gallup poll in 1968, it would have been like 5 million people. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
just in the
I
United
mean, yeah.
States.
Oh, my dogs might start barking. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a chance to, if you have any last words that you would want to say to any doctors, medical providers, therapists, counselors, so on and so forth, that might be watching this, that you think they really need to hear before they encounter someone who's having experiences.
I think the way that, if you're in the provider atmosphere, you know, just really, if you have a patient who brings up this topic, really, again, try and approach it from a place of curiosity and try and hear their story, and understand where they're coming from. I think is the first step, because I think if people come from a place of curiosity, then they can be open minded and they can learn from that place and move forward. But if you come from a place where you're shut down and you immediately dismissive, uh, you're gonna your patients are gonna run into challenges, and I just think it's beneficial for both you and the patient, and your quality scores and everything else will go up if you have better outcomes for your patients. So from that perspective, really just come from a place of curiosity.
And I have to say, open-minded questions are very good for this. They don't put a bias in any direction. You're just letting the patient talk, and that's a form of validation. So I
Absolutely.
that's worked for me, and some of my clients have spoken about spiritual encounters. It's not always UFOs, and I just let them tell me. I don't ever tell them what I'm interested in. I don't
Yeah.
tell them about my spiritual beliefs or anything. I don't They don't know if I believe them or not, ever. Like, I just
Right.
let them talk, and I think that's extremely validating. So, I agree with you.
I agree. And thank you for doing this. I mean, even this is validating. Hearing, being able to express something that I think other people are going through and normalize it, um, makes it very validating. And I appreciate you doing this with all the experiencers you've interviewed. It really helps us learn from each other. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you, and I hope more people will be brave enough to come and talk to us. Of course, they can reach out to me if they want to. I keep telling people I want to talk to
Yes.
everybody. So,
Awesome.
can you please let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, you right now I'm basically on Twitter or UFOX, I guess, as Awake While Sleeping. I do have Instagram and stuff, but I don't really use it. Maybe down the road you'll hear more from us. But right now that's basically where you can find me.
Well, thank you to everyone who listened, and thank you, Chris, for sharing so much. Thank you so much. We really
You bet.
appreciate it. Every time someone speaks, it helps someone else to feel less alone while they go through this journey. And as you said, it is quite a journey.
It
So
is.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate that you came. So thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Deb.
Yeah. And thank you to all who listened, and take care.